In my last video covering my East Coast road trip, I talked about my experience at Kings Island in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now it's time to head 3 hours north to one of the best amusement parks in the world. Here's my experience on June 15th and 16th at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. Alright, so we are on the road again. We just left Kings Island about an hour and a half ago. We had a fantastic day at Kings Island. It was one of the best theme park days I've ever had. Very, very hot, but luckily the lines were non-existent. So we got on everything that we wanted to ride. Definitely got plenty of rides on Orion and Diamondback. Got a good ride on Banshee. Still probably going to be my favorite invert. Diamondback has officially taken the spot as my number one hyper over Mako. So that's new. Back row on Diamondback was absolutely incredible. Had a little bit of a rattle, but you know, it was still a fantastic coasting experience compared to like Mako in the front row or the back row. So Orion's still a great coaster, especially in the front row. You feel that speed in the front row. Still think Fury is actually a better coaster than Orion, but anyway, we had a fantastic day at Kings Island. So we're headed up to Sandusky right now. We're headed up to Cedar Point. Just gonna check into our hotel around 10:30, 10:45, and then we're gonna be doing early entry tomorrow over at Cedar Point. Unfortunately, with the whole debacle with the deer and everything, we didn't really know whether or not we were gonna be able to make it the rest of the trip. So we canceled a lot of our hotel reservations, and unfortunately, Hotel Breakers was one of those trips that we canceled, or one of those hotels we canceled. So we are staying at an off-site hotel that is very, very, very close to the causeway to get to Cedar Point. So we'll also film that kind of drive over the causeway to get to the park in the morning. That means we will not be hitting the Magnum Gate and, you know, doing whatever we got to do to get on Steel Vengeance bright and early. So we'll probably start off the day with some of the B&Ms in the front of the park and kind of go our way from there. But that'll be in the next vlog that we'll take heading over to toward the park. Like I said in the video there, we did end up canceling our reservations at Hotel Breakers, so we ended up staying at the small hotel just across from the Cedar Point sign, a place called Cedar Cove. I didn't get any footage of the room we stayed in because I forgot, which unfortunately this theme follows for the rest of the trip. But you won't be missing much, as most of the hotels we stayed at were very simple rooms just to sleep for the night and get on the road or hit a park the next morning. We got to the hotel, checked in right away, and went straight to bed. We woke up bright and early the next day, got ready, and made the drive over the causeway, where the views definitely did not disappoint. Cedar Point, hands down, has the best skyline of any park, and the view just keeps getting better and better the closer you get. We got parked and made our way to the main gate. Although we were not staying on site anymore, we still had our Cedar Fair Platinum passes, which granted us early entry into the park. It might sound crazy, but my most anticipated ride to start the day was Gatekeeper. I visited the park back in July of 2021, and I was excited to have the chance to get on my first ever B&M wing coaster. Unfortunately, that didn't happen during my first trip, as it had its whole chain snapping fiasco that put the ride out of commission. So I was happy to see it running as we were pulling into the parking lot, and we decided to start our day there. We got a right side ride towards the back, and I absolutely loved it. The inversion going into the drop caught me completely off guard, and I loved how smooth and graceful the layout was. Not to mention the beauty from the height right along the beach. It was definitely a welcome start to the morning. We had plans to meet up with some friends and family at the park that day, and we were the first ones there by that point. We figured with the low crowds early in the day, we would be able to get a few rides in before having to meet up with them. So after Gatekeeper, we headed towards the park's B&M dive coaster, Valraven. Apparently this ride gets a lot of flack for being out of place at Cedar Point, but I actually love this coaster. In all honesty, I prefer Valraven over both Griffin and SheiKra. I think this coaster offers a more complete ride, plus the views from the top in the first row are just breathtaking. After Valraven, it was getting to be almost 10, so we headed toward the front of the park to link up with the rest of our party. Once we all got settled in, we decided to work our way to Raptor. Raptor had about a 30-minute line, which I thought was just a little too long for the ride. Don't get me wrong, I like Raptor. However, I do find it to be an inferior invert compared to the likes of Montu, Afterburn, or Banshee. After finishing up at Raptor, a few members of our group wanted to hit Valraven, which had a much longer line this time around. We braved the 40-minute line, which felt so much longer than it was, with the sweltering heat just getting worse and worse. I have no idea how, but Ohio was managing to be hotter than some of the hottest months in Florida. It even caused one of our group members to have to tap out of the line from dehydration. Nevertheless, we were able to make it through, which ended up being the second of many rides on Valraven this trip. After we finished up at Valraven, we decided to head deeper into the park and ended up near Frontier Town. We stopped for lunch at the Farmhouse Kitchen and Grill, which I strongly recommend, before attempting to ride Skyhawk. Skyhawk went down for technical difficulties while we were on it, so we left. Miraculously, at the exact same time, Maverick was coming up from a downtime, so we booked it to get in line straight away, and we only waited about 20 minutes. Maverick was phenomenal as always. Every single moment on the ride is rapid fire and hardly ever lets up. The launch out of the tunnel and into the bank turn over the water just feels so chaotic, and I love the ride for that very reason. I just wish they would bring back the water effects, as I miss them very much. We left Frontier Town after Maverick. We were going to attempt to get on Steel Vengeance, but unfortunately Vengeance had been down nearly all day with very little signs of movement. We decided we would try again later in the day, as maybe a miracle would come our way. We wanted to go and give Millennium Force a try, but it was being finicky all day as well, with several occurrences of trains getting stuck on the lift hill throughout the day and causing delays. We decided to take some time to recoup from the heat by heading back to our car, where we had some snacks and cold waters waiting for us. Before we left the park though, some of our party members decided to take a ride on Cedar Point's Sky Coaster, as it was something they had never done before. I, being a man of reason, opted out from this, but it was very fun to catch their reactions on video. After the break, everyone we met up with decided to call it a day, and then it was just the two of us. We headed back inside, and to our surprise, Millennium Force was up and running with a pretty minimal line. We got right in line and decided to wait for our first ever front row ride, which was absolutely phenomenal. The sense of speed in the first row is remarkable, the view from the top is surreal, and the airtime is actually pretty good. I also just really love the T-bar restraints, as they make the ride that much more enjoyable. As we were exiting Millie, I checked the Cedar Point app just to see if there were any updates to Vengeance's status. To our surprise, Steve was posted at a 20-minute wait with 30 minutes before park close. I didn't really believe it, but I had to see for myself. So we headed to the back of the park again, and to our relief, we see Vengeance cycling, with the line being the shortest I have ever seen before. We were actually on in what I thought was less than 20 minutes, which made the trek to the back of the park well worth it. Steel Vengeance was hauling. Every single moment delivered as usual, with the first drop in the Outer Banked Airtime Hill being absolutely amazing. We were in the middle row, which wasn't ideal, but the ride slaps in any row, so I was fine with it. It was 7:55 when we left Vengeance. We were battered from the long day we had. Our feet were throbbing with pain, the sunburn was very real, and we were both pretty hungry as it was. But I was determined to get last ride of the night on Maverick. It took a little convincing, but after passing the queue and seeing it practically empty, it was a no-brainer. We got last ride of the night on Maverick, which was an awesome sunset ride in the back row with a nearly empty train. With that, our first day at Cedar Point was complete. We got food, headed back to the hotel, and knocked right out as we had to do it all over again the next day. The start to day 2 at Cedar Point wasn't as early, but the morning crowds were still just as light as the day before. We decided to skip the B&Ms first thing in the morning and started the day off with the first hypercoaster ever, Magnum XL 200. We walked right onto the Magic Seat and got a very nice morning ride. The coaster is still as janky as ever, but I love the out-of-control airtime on the return hills, as it just makes it that much more chaotic. My girlfriend, on the other hand, was not a big fan of the classic aero goodness. After we left Magnum, we headed towards Steel Vengeance, as it was getting to be almost 10 o'clock and a line was already forming outside the station. We waited about 30 minutes in total that morning before getting another awesome ride in on Steel Vengeance. After Steve, we decided to stop at the Farmhouse Kitchen again for some early lunch. My girlfriend wasn't feeling very well, so we decided to split up. She ended up heading back to the hotel for a much needed nap, and I stayed behind taking plenty of pictures and off-ride footage. It was getting around 5 or 6 p.m. when I finally decided to go on another coaster, with it being on Gemini. Gemini ran smooth, but the racing aspect did not go off so great, with the red train beating us by a landslide. I also decided to get 3 back-to-back rides on Valraven because it was nearly a station wait and I just fell in love with the ride. This was followed by a front row ride on Raptor, which was also almost a station wait. And I appreciated the view of the midway from the front row. Throughout the day, I had attempted several times to get a ride or two in on Millie, but she was being finicky again. But just as I was passing by, I was hearing commotion that it might open up again, and to my surprise, it did. I got right in line and headed towards the back. I had never had a back row ride on Millie before, so I didn't really know what I was in for. Mind you, I had not eaten much this day, and I'm pretty sure I was severely dehydrated from the heat and not drinking enough water. So here I go, heading into the first drop on Millennium Force, not expecting much to happen, when I begin to completely lose all of my vision. For the first time in my coaster riding life, I was experiencing a full-blown blackout. I have grayed out plenty of times. Hulk, Kumba, and even Mako have been prime culprits of this. But blacking out? I didn't know what to do. I just tried to control my breathing and regain my vision, and the next thing I knew, I was flying into the first airtime hill. It was unreal. I have never come off a roller coaster shaken, but after that ride, I was smitten. My girlfriend joined me and we decided to get right back in line for Millie. I thought the blackout might have been a one-off thing, so I had to see if the so-called Millennium Forceless was actually causing me to completely black out. And then it happened again, which ultimately just solidified this ride as my number 2 overall coaster. I was shook. We ended our day of coaster riding there, which I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. We took the last few minutes of park hours to spend time getting some souvenirs and merch before heading back to the hotel and calling it a night. So here are some of my final thoughts on Cedar Point. This is one of the best amusement parks in the world, if not the best. I talked about the operations at Kings Island being elite, and Cedar Points are really good too. I do wish that their coasters could be a little bit more reliable sometimes, but that's what happens when you are constantly breaking records and pushing the boundaries of new technology. Sometimes things go down and we just gotta make the best of the situation. Besides that, the lineup at Cedar Point, in my opinion, is unmatched. You have so much variety to choose from, it really is quite astounding. For this park, we decided that we would only ride coasters that we are really excited for, so coasters like Rougarou, Iron Dragon, Blue Streak, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, and Corkscrew just simply weren't ridden to maximize what we wanted from our visit. The good news is that there's a coaster for just about everyone at this park, so everyone has a choice to pick and choose what they want to ride the most. In the end, the final ride counts are as follows: 5 on Valraven, 3 on Millennium Force, 2 on Maverick, 2 on Steel Vengeance, 2 on Raptor, 1 on Gatekeeper, 1 on Magnum XL200, and 1 on Gemini. This park is clearly Cedar Fair's pride and joy, and it's always a pleasure to visit America's rock and roller coast. So what are your thoughts on Cedar Point? Have you ever been? Do you want to go? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. With that, I'm Sean from East Coast Amusements, and I'll see you in the next one.